Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Jarman and I'm the Assistant Curator for Exhibitions and Academic Outreach here at the Welland Museum, and I am joined by René Treviño. We're going to preview his exhibition, René Treviño, Stab of Guilt, today for you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Well, René, I think we should give everyone a little sneak peek here. I love the way that we decided to use this Papel Picado as sort of like the entryway into the exhibition and give people kind of this sense of continuity from the outside, of course, then in here to this wonderful stage where we have three brand new pieces, respectively titled Regalia, Intuition, Regalia, Premonition, and Regalia, Foresight. And I think it's a wonderful way to start the show because obviously we have this mashup happening here of the European courtly robes, the Aztec-inspired headdresses, and then a lot of contemporary fashion in terms of the patches and the embroidery and the embellishments. So I want to talk to you, though, about why you felt compelled to do these, because I so often think of you as a painter, and then you had this wonderful idea to work in textiles for the show.
Sure. Well, when I came to the Welland for the first time, this was, 3 years ago, I just saw how big the museum was and was like, wait, I don't think it can only be wall art, you know? And I'd had in my head this idea for these capes that were going to kind of blend European coronation capes with Aztec regalia, and wanting to mash those two things together, kind of thinking about how brutal the conquest was, and thinking could that, instead of being brutality, instead of being robbing, instead of being raping, instead of being pillaging, could it be a more beautiful kind of exchange of information? And so that's kind of where the thought process for these came, but it also felt like a coming home for me because while I have primarily painted for the last few years, I'm a theater kid, you know. I studied theater at Texas A&M University. I worked in a lot of costume shops in New York City before I moved to Baltimore. And so in a lot of ways, it just felt like the perfect thing to kind of start making for this exhibit.
Well, and I love that, we had the time, you talk about we started this process 3 years ago, for you to imagine doing something new and maybe a little scary for you to try.
For sure. And 3 years sounds like a long time, but it goes by like that. And so it didn't all, towards the end I was like, I don't have enough time, but we got through it.
Well, I want to take us over now to the earliest piece in the show, actually. This beautiful Aztec calendar, which is getting close to the real size of the Aztec calendar in the Museum of Anthropology down in Mexico City. This one's around 9 feet in diameter, and the real thing is closer to 12 feet. But talk to me about what it was like to go and see it in person for the first time, because that really kick-started something for you.
Well, the real Aztec calendar is at the Anthropology Museum of Art in Mexico City, and it's up on a pedestal, and it's beautifully lit. And it's this fantastic monolith of carved stone. And it's a calendar, as it literally tells you, the calendrical days of the year, but it also speaks to a lot of their spiritual beliefs. So it's doing a lot of things at once, and seeing the real calendar was such a moving experience for me. And when I got home from that trip, I just started painting it, and I painted it again and again and again, and it's something that still resonates with me. I think I had seen the Aztec calendar a million times, on T-shirts or on bumper stickers, but then when I saw the real thing, it was such a different thing, and I'm always, when I paint it, I'm trying to get at that feeling that I had when I first saw it, and I don't know that I can ever do that. But I keep trying, and I think that pursuit is lofty. So, yeah, and so you'll see it here, but you'll see it in several other points throughout the exhibit.
Yes, I love right over here in this large grid that you have created of 119 individual paintings called the Circumference Series, that right there in the middle we see the Aztec calendar again. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, the source material, because you've seen the real thing, but often you're painting depictions of the Aztec calendar not from the real thing.
Yeah, a lot of them are, from the photographs that I took while I was there, and then I'm taking those and I'm painting from those. But some of them I'm painting from like the souvenir at the souvenir gift shop. It's this funny human thing. I think it's a very human thing to go to a place and want to collect something from that space that will help you remember that trip, those memories, who you were with, that day, the object itself. And so, I have a collection of Aztec calendar souvenirs, and a lot of times I paint the souvenir because, again, it's like that thing that has a special memory, and I want this wall to kind of be that, I want the viewer to see something that perhaps they recognize, but then maybe they don't recognize the thing next to it, and you can start to create your own narrative.
Yeah, and I think we've had so many wonderful conversations about value in terms of this Circumference Series, because of course the Aztec calendar, it's one of a kind, and it's priceless. But all the souvenirs people have, like you said, and that's what's special to them, right? Yeah. Yes, it's just a souvenir, but it has real meaning and value
For sure.
to the person who collected it. And I look at the larger grid, and that idea of value just keeps coming up, where you have these depictions of priceless works of art, and then a sliced cabbage, or a home goods wall clock, or something like that. And
Absolutely.
just talking about this idea of high and low, but also the value that society places on an object versus personally.
Absolutely. Do you remember in 2012 when we thought that the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar was coming to an end?
Right.
Well, the Mayan calendar, there's some overlap in terms of content with the Aztec calendar, but they're not the same, right? So, this is a depiction of the Aztec calendar. This image up there with the black and the purple and the blue is a depiction of the Mayan calendar. And around that time, major news sources were getting this wrong. It was wrong on Saturday Night Live. It was wrong on NBC Nightly News. They were talking about what was happening with the Mayan calendar, but they were showing the Aztec calendar. And there was this great meme, and the meme was, this is the Aztec calendar, this is the Mayan calendar, and this is an Oreo cookie. And I loved that because it meant sometimes I didn't have to paint the Aztec calendar anymore. I could paint an Oreo cookie.
Yes.
And it gave me permission, I think, to really, expand the series. We're on this big sphere, Earth. We're surrounded by the moon, the sun, all these other spheres. So there's something about that circular shape that I think is so powerful and just it's entrenched inside of all of us.
Well, and it's obviously a shape that we see over and over and over again in the exhibition, but it really does not seem like a constraint to you. It kind of feels like you're just continuing to go down this wormhole of seeing circles everywhere.
I think I've seen them all, and then I'll see a million more.
Yeah.
And so this series right now, it's 119, but maybe the next time it gets installed, it'll be 1,005.
Oh my gosh.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, this is probably, I think, it sounds weird to say, I love all of your artwork, but I think this is one of my favorite pieces in the show, this diptych here, where we have two depictions of Hercules, and this is the moment when Hercules has taken over for Atlas, and he's carrying the burden of the heavens, but you, of course, have replaced the heavens here, the celestial orb, with a knot, originally by Leonardo da Vinci and then copied by his slightly younger contemporary Albrecht Dürer. And then here, of course, with the Aztec calendar. And once again, these are Hercules figures that are, home goods store bought?
No. These are actually, that's funny. I like that you made that, mistake. But there are definitely home goods objects that are painted within this series. But this is actually from a Renaissance bronze by the artist Taka, Tacca. And so it's that moment when Hercules has taken over for our Atlas, and I love it. I'm always like on this quest, I mean, for heroes, right? Like everyone, I think we're all looking for heroes. And, I think one of the things that throughout my research has become clear again and again and again is that a hero for us or for anyone is probably a villain to someone else. And so, what is a hero, right? A hero is simultaneously someone who builds us up and offers us hope, but also, is probably a villain to the side characters in the narrative, right? And so it's an interesting way to think about it. But, I still love mythology, right? And those stories, they still resonate with me. I want to kind of still think about all of that. I'm never trying to eschew any of that Western mythology or Western canon, but I am trying to complicate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just even the idea of, this figure who's so prominent in Greek and Roman mythology, but here with this Mesoamerican calendar is so powerful to me, this idea of merging these two very different canons together.
Yeah. And I think of it also because he's holding the burden of the universe, and that is a tremendous burden. And I just think about the burden that we have as Mexican Americans, as Mexicans in general. Like, that's a serious burden as well. And so I sort of like the potential metaphor there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get away from the hot pink, I guess, for a second, but let's go to some more colors here that we have in the walls of the Yucatan. And when did you go to the Yucatan?
I've been several times. It's one of my husband and I, it's one of our favorite places to visit. So we go, and every time we go, we spend a couple days on the beach.
Yeah.
But we also do a lot of research. So we're looking at all the ruins. We've been to Chichen Itza, we've been to Cobal, we've been to Tulum, and I always take pictures. I take 1 million pictures. But I came back from one of those trips, and I realized, without even really knowing, that I had taken these pictures not of the whole entire structure, but just of these stones, these bricks. And what's interesting is that originally these would have been plastered over and covered with pattern and design and lots of color. But now, because of them being in a state of ruin, you see the bricks again, you see the stones. And I love that because it shows the handmade quality of it all. You sort of see that with way more primitive tools than the ones we're working with now, they were still able to accomplish these tremendous architectural feats. But this gives you kind of a peek behind the curtain as to how those structures are standing up. And I love the decision making, like someone made a decision to put this stone next to this stone. You'll see little bits of grass or plant life that have kind of peeked through because life, will always find a way. And I just found it so moving, and I just think about the labor of building these walls, how long that must have taken without sort of contemporary tools. And it was really marvelous to me. And so I made this kind of thinking about all of those. Now,
you've talked a lot about, the symbolism here in terms of the Maya diligence required, to build these enormous, fantastic structures that, are still intact today. But there's also a theme here in terms of labor that I think is more personal for you.
Well, I will say that, these take a long time to make. It's literally hours of me with my little tiny paintbrushes hunched over my table. So they, in and of themselves, are very laborious. And I think a lot of times when people see work like this, they are thinking that me as an artist, that I have all this great time to meditate, that I'm meditating while I'm making my paintings. And it's just the opposite. As I'm painting, my mind is going crazy, and I'm thinking about the next things I want to paint. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about, all the different things that a person has to think about. But my brain is never idle and at rest. I'm never at one with the painting. But I think that that's related to labor here because, I mean, look at all the labor it took to make these. I'm also just thinking about the generational labor that I've benefited from because, you know, like my grandmother had 11 kids on my mom's side, and they literally raised themselves out of poverty with just hard work. And I saw that, you know, that was modeled for me as I was growing up. And so it's not the same kind of labor. I'm not going to try to say that this is the same as picking cotton or this is the same as stacking bricks, back-breaking kind of work, but it is work. And I want to make that distinction. It's not meditative, it's not peaceful.
Yeah.
It's freaking work.
No, I mean, you could have just, you know, colorized the photo and printed that out. This is a very intentional decision to recreate it through this very almost pointillist style of painting.
Absolutely.
I want to move us on to some of the codices.
Yes.
And, you know, it's been so wonderful here at Hamilton College. We have all these amazing faculty who want to engage with the exhibitions. And so we actually had one of our professors, Mackenzie Cooley, come and talk to us about Mesoamerican history for one of our docent training sessions. And we got to talk about what is a codex and the few codices that survive from before the conquest. And this idea that there was such an amazing loss of information when the Spanish arrived. They just destroyed so much. And so on one hand, you know, okay, that's sad that we don't have those existing texts anymore. But on the other hand, I feel like it's an opening for you as an artist to say, oh, well, I can come in and fill in the blank and kind of recreate a version of history as an artist, not as a historian, but just to imagine. And so you have all of these wonderful hides here that are part of this larger format of working with the codex for you. How did you get interested in that, and where is this going, you think, in your mind?
Well, I was thinking about those original codexes or codices. We only have, I think, around 12 of them, right? Like, so few. And so the imagery that's packed within some of them just is, I mean, it would already have been impactful because they're really stunning, but the fact that there's so much scarcity also just like elevates them, I think, and puts a ton of importance on them. So going through them, you know, and just finding shapes and figures that I find interesting, and you're right, I think as an artist, not as a historian, I have more latitude to kind of move things around and shift things. And like this triptych it's called Codex because all the imagery is from codices, but then it's called Humanity is Garbage. Because I'm an optimist in general, right? Like I'm a happy person. I love life. I feel really fortunate, but I also, you know, we all have our good days and we also have our bad days, and then we also can look at what's happening in the world right now, but also all the history of all the terrible things that have happened in the world. And, you know, humanity is garbage, right? We're both of those things. I think it's a struggle constantly to kind of think about the best version of ourselves versus the worst version of ourselves. And hopefully you think about that here. I mean, here you've got this really beautiful, splendid bird, and then you've got the jaguar, another sort of like just magical creature. And then in the third image, you have humanity come in, and you see that both the jaguar and the bird have been consumed, right? And I think that's kind of a really human narrative of just destroying beauty, right? You know, the things we're doing to the planet, the animals that we've caused to become extinct. So it's this cycle that I just really want us to reflect on so that we can hopefully do better.
And so you've spoken a little bit about this historical precedent that you're sort of building upon, some connections to our contemporary society. There's also, again, just this wonderful element of fashion in here. And can you talk a little bit about, you know, what you saw growing up in Texas fashion-wise, what you got exposed to working in those costume shops at Broadway? Like, fashion continues to find its way into your work.
Well, both of my grandmothers sewed, and I thought that was really great, and it was really just marvelous. They were doing it kind of out of necessity. My father's mother was doing it to kind of bring a little bit of money into the family, My mom's mother was making like these really gorgeous quilts. It was really great to just see how they were using their hands and making these things that were beautiful, but maybe beauty wasn't the first thing. It was about, the utility and warmth of a quilt, right? And then, as I went to make these, a lot of those original codices, they did have paper technology in Mesoamerica, but a lot of them were also on like stretched deer skin. And so I was thinking, what's a contemporary version of that? Thinking about all the fashion that I consume. Every time it's Fashion Week, I spend a lot of time on the internet watching all the fashion shows. And so I do very much get inspired by all of that. And so I was thinking, what's a contemporary version of that deer skin? And these metallic skins just came to mind, and I was like, all right, let's play with those. Because I can paint, I paint a lot with metallics, and I like a rhinestone, but there's something about the kind of sheen and the finish of these metallic skins that I find so captivating, so luminous. Like, even like with gold leaf, I think you can't get as luminous as these skins are, which is really exciting. And it's been such an interesting thing to work. I mean, all the other paintings in the show, I kind of know what the image is going to look like beforehand. But with these, because I'm really working with the shape of the leather as I get it from the tanner,
Right.
I just put them up on my studio wall, and I really have to think for a long time about what the image is going to be. And it's a really different way of working for me, because, like I said, usually I know what I'm going to get. And with these, it starts with the skin, that shape, and then I, find the image that's going to go on it. And it's very much the other way around. So, but I like to challenge myself in the studio. I like to work in different ways. And I think these, came out of that.
And it's interesting to hear, like, sometimes when you do have an idea and you just go for it, versus with these, they have to sort of talk to you for a while and tell you what they need.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, with the time we have left, I want to make two quick stops here that I think sort of just speak to why the exhibition is particularly special because of what we can offer at Hamilton. And of course, we love our contemporary exhibitions that we do every year, but we also do have a collection of historic art. And one of the things that you requested pretty quickly after you came here for the first time was to start reviewing our Mesoamerican collection. And it was really wonderful for me to be in the room when you were looking at some of these objects and some of the things you were noticing that I've never picked up on. But what we have here on this wall is a display of some of our objects from the Mesoamerican collection, paired with images that you created long before we even knew each other, but you found this resonance between what was here on site at the museum and what you've been creating now for over a decade. So can you talk about how you take inspiration from collections, what archaeology and historic art mean to you?
Well, coming here 3 years ago, I think one of the first things I did when I realized, when we were starting to figure out what this show was going to be, one of the things that I did first was just go through your online database, because you have a ton of stuff. There's a ton of resources that you have on the Welland website. And so I was going through and I was looking at your collection. And then when I physically came here, you guys were so generous and pulled the things out for me. And I don't know, there's a real power with some of these objects. They have a real significant kind of presence, and you feel a kind of energy, even though they're very much removed from their original context. And so, and then as soon as I saw some of them, I was like, oh, well, this reminds me of this painting that I made, or this reminds me of this other image that I was looking at. And it's been so great to see the work in conversation. It feels really special to kind of be included in that sort of, generational exchange. Yeah.
And again, you coming in here as an artist and requesting to see these things only, spurred us to do further research on some of these objects that we hadn't, done as much digging around on. And so we learned some things about, our own collection just because of the prompt from you to bring them out. So, it's just so mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And so I want to end by looking at a series that was based off of something else we brought out, and this time from the archives over at the Burke Library here at Hamilton College, and specifically this series of star charts that were made in the second half of the 19th century by Hamilton College's very first professor of astronomy, who would also go on to be the director of the Litchfield Observatory, our first observatory on campus. And we brought these star charts out, and for me, I was just so interested in the story of this man who was using, at the time, the second largest telescope in the country, which just happened to be housed here at Hamilton, and trying to not only start up an astronomy program at Hamilton, but do his own groundbreaking research. And I got so interested in that story. But you also found something, I think, aesthetically that drew you in and made you want to work with these objects. So what was it like to go in and see these things, and what did it inspire in you?
Well, there's a set of 20 of these star charts, and they came in this really big kind of folio, right? And there's like there's an author's note by the astronomer, by Peters, and I loved reading that note and him sort of explaining the series. I also loved just the actual objects themselves. In the library, very often, which is a little bit different than in museums, we just saw those beautiful objects that you have here in the museum that I was never allowed to touch, which I completely understand. But at the library, I was able to kind of touch these things and go through the leaves and really, I think, get a feeling from them, right? I also love that the paper's kind of tattered. I love that the paper's yellowed, too. And basically, it's a really beautiful kind of graph paper, right? It's a graph, and then he's plotted the stars from that specific telescope on the specific evening that's listed on the star chart. And so I loved that. He's taking a very mathematical kind of approach to astronomy. I take a kind of different approach with my astronomical explorations. For me, it's more poetic, or it's about, this idea of queering space too, which I love, and thinking about the history of space exploration, and then thinking about the potential of space exploration in the future. Anyway, so I saw these, and my first impulse was like, wow, I would really love to draw on these. And, then we put them away. And then I just kept thinking about them. And maybe on my second or third visit, we looked at them again, and I was like, can I work with these? And they made me these really beautiful high-resolution scans of each of these. And then when I got those printed, I really was able to draw and paint.
Yeah, let's check out some of the results here.
Here I am kind of thinking about, one of the things that he studied, that Peter studied while he was here, was during the day, he was kind of building off the research of Galileo and looking at sunspots. So the spots that are on the sun. And it's through those sunspots that originally we figured out that the sun rotates. And so during the day, he was sort of expanding on that research. But then at night, he would use that same telescope, and he would seek out asteroids. And I think he found he's the discoverer of 48 asteroids. And on some of them, you actually see the asteroids listed.
Oh, yeah.
And so he got to name 48 asteroids, which I think is really beautiful. So the name of the series is Sunspots by Day, Asteroids by Night. And then I just went to town with it. You can see that I painted out some of the rectangles. That's me kind of treating it like graph paper, right? I was thinking about color. I was thinking about what would work, what would be a great contrast up against that yellowed, aged paper. And, I knew that a neon rainbow would look really sharp and provide a great deal of contrast for that. And then, it's the thing that I was talking about before, I want to make space gay. I want to make space super, super gay. So, then throwing in the sequins, the appliques, the pearls, all the things, in addition to like some of the handmade, like, that's one of my more traditional kind of paintings.
Yeah.
With the pointillist kind of dots. And then for the sunspots, a lot of times I was thinking, I was originally going to paint sunspots, like I was going to sort of quote some of Galileo's sunspot drawings, but I found this really beautiful sequin fabric, and it's flippable. It's that kind of sequin that on one side it's one color and on the other side it's a different color. And that just became like an interesting way to draw, because even just that act of flipping a sequin in this context is drawing. And those become like a really stylized kind of sunspot.
There's also something here about, one, translation. So when you look at the original star charts, if you are not well-versed in that type of documentation, you wouldn't be able to really read it. You wouldn't be able to fully understand it. And here, you've taken some of the things he's looking at, like a sunspot, like an asteroid, and you've painted it. You've made it accessible to the layperson, but then there's also just this wonderful sense of possibility that these things that you're putting on there, they could be constellations out there somewhere in deep space. We don't.
Well, that's the thing, because space is infinite,
Yeah.
right? Space is infinite, so it feels like whatever I can conceive, think of, imagine, infinite. Space is infinite, so it probably exists.
So we have these wonderful 20 mixed media pieces on top of the facsimiles of Peter's work, leading you down here to the very last piece in the show. And I think it's fitting for a couple of reasons. One, we sort of begin with the Aztec calendar. Here we are ending with the Aztec calendar. But this is also a self-portrait.
It is a self-portrait. I think when you saw this the first time, you said, wow, those feathers, those are like your hair.
Yeah, totally.
Which I didn't even have the hair.
I know, you had short hair back then.
When I made this painting. But there is something about the rooster, which has always been kind of an animal that I just gravitate towards. I think they're so beautiful and interesting and kind of creepy, and there's a kind of darkness to them at the same time that they're really magical. And they also, I think, do the work of like a calendar, and like the fact that they wake us up every morning with that beautiful caw.
Yeah.
Anyway, like putting the two things together very much just seemed like a way to get at an image of myself without painting an image.
Yeah. And of course, there's just a few rhinestones in
One
there
or
as
two
well.
rhinestones. You gotta throw in a rhinestone for the people.
Well, we're almost out of time. I think we have a moment for just maybe one question that might have come in.
Yep, we have a question. I too love a rhinestone. Can you explain why you choose to include such visual, theatrical elements in your work beyond the wow factor?
So I just want to repeat that so that everyone hears it. So someone who themselves loves rhinestones posted a question asking why you choose to incorporate that type of very blingy material in the work.
I think there's probably different answers for all of the different paintings. I think about it a lot because I never want the rhinestone to be like, just like a given, right? So, I think it's interesting when you think about space, and when you look up literally at the stars at night, you kind of see a little flicker. Sometimes a cloud will go through and that star disappears for a second, and then it will come back. Sometimes you'll be lucky enough to see a shooting star. And there's a little bit of a glimmer in the sky, and the only way that I can think to like create that kind of experience in a painting is with a rhinestone. Also, I'm thinking about camp and drag, and I think it's another kind of way to kind of throw some queerness into the mix. I like that they're rhinestones specifically, as opposed to like semi-precious jewels or whatever. First of all, because those become unaffordable, but also because I like the thickness of it.
Yeah.
There's something about it, still beautiful. And I really do love, especially here, when you come see the work in real life, the way that everything's lit, the rhinestones really, really pop, and it's great to see.
And I love, when we get to have these conversations, because there's so much of yourself in the work, it is very personal, and I get to learn more about you. But I also just want to end with you know, talking about how important your work is in terms of giving us a little bit of hope, reminding us of our shared humanity, that we are actually more similar than different.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we keep hearing on the news, like, we're living in a polarized country, we're living in a polarized world right now. And I think any type of artwork that you can go and spend some time looking at, that it's just going to remind you that actually we're all in this together, spinning around on this planet, is so important to see right now. So I can't wait for everybody to come in here and check out the exhibition. Again, this has been our preview of René Treviño, Stab of Guilt, and we really hope that you will come see it at the Welland Museum before it closes on June 9th. We hope a lot of you that are watching are actually going to come join us tomorrow, February 17th from 4 to 6 for the opening. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Thank you.